Welcome back to Between the Ashes, the Growing Silence for Freespace 2 here on Paladin Gaming. This is the tech room, and we are not going to read the tech room. We'd be here all day. But, new in Between the Ashes, you can categorize the tech room entries by none, by type, which goes in alphabetical order, by type, or by faction or manufacturer. And the second two let you select the factions and manufacturers and read about them, so we're going to do that today. Starting with the Antares Federation. The Antares Federation is a populous, decentralized, independent government centered in the Antares system. Taking inspiration from similar structures in Terran history, the Constitution of the Antares Federation describes each of its member worlds and habitats as equal partners under a central parliamentary-style government, supported by a carefully chosen system of checks and balances designed with the help of noted political theorist Diana Patil. In spite of this, the new government's first act was a vote to grant itself emergency powers, which passed unanimously. Go figure. The movement that would become the Antares Federation had been a thorn in the Alliance's side throughout its attempt to restore law and order in Antares. The influence of secessionist media figures, most notoriously the firebrand Caleb Ian, brought popular approval of the Alliance to historic lows, mirrored by a growing prevalence of federal ideas. A major turning point came on November 19, 2336 with the Battle of Camp Angel. Alliance forces reinforced the refugee camp. Writes refuge. That's a common typo throughout this, I've noticed. In expectation of a hammer of light raid, which was successfully repulsed. Pro-secession pundits, however, spun the battle as the Alliance using refugees to achieve their military objectives. Camp Angel's largely Vasudan population proved unfortunate as well, with the battle giving the Federation an effective talking point to appeal to Antares' Vasudan diaspora. Shortly thereafter, open violence between the Federation and the Alliance became common, culminating in the Allied fleet's withdrawal from the system. Besides Antares itself, the Federation lays claim to Beta Cygni, Betelgeuse, Ikea, and Ribos, to which it holds the only jump nodes. In spite of its promises to focus on the problems plaguing Antares, early federal activity focused primarily on reinforcing their borders and spinning up industry to augment their fleet of stolen GTA craft and retrofitted cargo ships. The Federation maintains limited trade with the Alliance, but is more willing to deal with the Vasudan Empire. While the government maintains considerable popular support, these policies have been seen as unsustainable both economically and politically. As Antarian political commentator Ian Bonnet put it, the Antares Federation did the impossible, both in defeating a much stronger power militarily and in building a shared identity across the system. Ask the average person on the street and they will identify themselves as Antarian before species, ethnicity, or political orientation. This is one perspective. Another is that the Federation rose to power through hatred, violence, and terror. Both are true. For the Federation to set policy which makes reparations for the evils it carried out, no matter how necessary, must therefore be seen as nothing less than a moral imperative. That'll be the day. Alright, so let's move on to the next entry, the Galactic Terran Alliance. This is a translation of an article intended for Vasudan observers. A copy of the original may be requested from any terminal. The Galactic Terran Alliance is the unified Terran government, formed to provide a framework for humanity's diverse cultures to coexist. A plurality of viewpoints is at the Alliance's core. Earth's ancient cultures find new expression together among the stars. Religions and philosophies dating back thousands of years debate with those founded within a human lifespan. The diversity of human cultures, ideologies, and ethnicities is a central pillar of human society even today. The Alliance formed out of a period of intense internecine conflict in the early days of human spaceflight. The Unification War left humanity bloodied and exhausted, and its aftermath came with a period of introspection. How could we ensure such a thing would never happen again? The answer was ultimately simple. Together. The Alliance's capital is Exarch Station in Delta Serpentis, having been moved from Sol following the destruction of the Lucifer. The collapse of the Sol jump node came unexpectedly, leaving many senior members of the Alliance government stranded. For many positions, the line of succession could not find a suitable replacement outside of Sol, triggering a round of special elections. For the time being, the size of political diversity was unfortunately degraded during the emergency, with a coalition of the conservative and moderate parties opposed by the liberal socialists, although a growing Labour Party provides a third option. The transition also brought with it hard questions about the nature of Allied government, as the historically large degree of autonomy given to Alliance systems has proven a barrier to reconstruction efforts. For the time being, the size of the Alliance's legislative body, the General Assembly, has been reduced to allow for more efficient negotiations. The decentralized nature of Allied government has unfortunately allowed for illegal activity to flourish on the fringes of society, and the Alliance Navy puts forth considerable effort to curtailing them. Much like the Hammer of Light, these organizations operate outside the bounds of Alliance law and prey on the vulnerable for their own ends. It is our hope that, in peacetime, both the criminal groups and the power structures that enable them may be brought to heel. Alright, next entry is the Hammer of Light itself. The Hammer of Light, also called the HOL or disparagingly Holly, represents the dark side of the Vasudan affinity for history. Citing esoteric prophecies of great destroyers which would wipe away the present world to make way for the next, a number of Vasudan naval personnel defected to the Shivan cause. While specific beliefs varied among sects, units, and individuals, at its core the Hammer of Light ideology equates the Shivans with these destroyers, and asserts that assisting them is necessary for salvation in the next world. Throughout the Shivan incursion, the Hammer of Light interfered with GTA and PVN operations, both through conventional military tactics and terrorist activity. The destruction of the SD Lucifer shocked the Hammer of Light, with some leaders committing ritual suicide, but did not dissolve the organization as some had hoped. Instead, previously fringe sects came into power, bringing with them an ideological shift. The orthodox view holds that the Shivans have merely withdrawn for a time. The Hammer then should prepare for their return. The Imminent, IMMINENT, view, conversely, holds that the Shivan defeat represents a passing of the torch, and that the Hammer themselves now must embody the destroyers. The following is classified at level Rho, but openly available in the tech room. Agents of Parliamentary Vasudan intelligence embedded in the HOL are working to foment distrust, I believe it means foment rather than ferment, distrust between these two sides and promote the orthodox perspective so as to delay further terrorist activity. The Hammer of Light's power base is significant. When the leaders of the Altair branch of the Vasudan Sar Corporation defected, the Hammer of Light gained a sizable fleet and a massive, well-defended shipyard to support it. They have captured many PVN warships, including multiple Typhon-class destroyers. Most concerning, however, are their retrofitted Imhotep science cruisers. These ships are concentrated around Vasudan worlds which suffered heavily during the previous years of war, and broadcast a message of joining a greater cause, which has proven to be an effective recruiting tool. The GTA and PVN continue to cooperate to bring an end to the HOL. Long-term plans for a joint endeavor have been in the works ever since the end of the Shivan incursion. Ironically, by providing a common enemy to focus on, the Hammer of Light may have helped preserve the ceasefire between our civilizations. The Luyten New Alliance is our next entry. It seems to be going in alphabetical order. In the aftermath of Antares' breakaway from the GTA, a coalition of scientific and industrial leaders, retired officers, and STX leadership, dissatisfied with Alliance policy but lacking a system to call their own, approached the General Assembly with a proposal. They asked that the Luyten system be granted autonomy in exchange for regular scientific contributions and cooperation on monitoring the frontier for Shivan activity. This proposal was eventually accepted, and the Luyten New Alliance became an officially sanctioned client state. Officially, the relationship between the GTA and LNA is one of mutual assistance. The GTA provided capital to establish the LNA's habitats, and is obligated to provide military support should Luyten come under attack. Conversely, the LNA dedicated a portion of its research capacity to militarily relevant projects for the GTA Navy. The reality is more complicated. The Luyten New Alliance, because it always is, isn't it? The Luyten New Alliance was born out of dissatisfaction, and the proposal could more accurately be described as an ultimatum. There is still some ongoing tension between the two governments, especially from the LNA's fledgling military. These tensions are exacerbated by unverified but plausible reports of former GTI rebels now hiding among the LNA's research teams. Worse, empirical evidence suggests that there may have been some merit to the LNA's policy demands. Their research output has significantly outperformed expectations, which observers in Luyten generally attribute to the LNA's political and regulatory restructuring. There is some concern that the LNA's success may attract talented researchers to immigrate from GTA space. Proposals to import elements of LNA policy are being considered. Tensions aside, the arrangement with the LNA has been highly successful overall. The latest generation of naval jump drives and subspace sensors came out of Luyten, with civilian versions following shortly behind. The LNA's Tier Interceptor, densely flak platform, and experimental beam cannons have all attracted interest from naval procurement. and the design of Luyten's communication network shows considerable promise as next-generation model for the GTA's core systems. While the relationship may have started with an ultimatum, it seems to have worked out for the best. Other multiple isn't really an entry. Some technologies are not produced by multiple providers, or are speculative or historical designs which are not being actively produced. So we'll skip over all of that, go to the Parliamentary Vasudan Empire. The Parliamentary Vasudan Empire was our enemy during the 14 Years' War. Emphasis must be placed on the word was. Our civilizations cooperated to drive back the Shivan incursion, and the possibility of a lasting peace is upon us. Maintaining the ceasefire is therefore of the utmost importance. We must not allow personal feelings or the Hammer of Light to reignite old vendettas. General Order 32 was put in place for a reason, and any officer or enlisted personnel who does not believe they can abide by its requirements may request a transfer without penalty. Politically, Vasudan society is structured quite unlike our own. The Emperor enjoys considerable personal power, bound more by tradition than law. However, there is considerable precedent for the courts to limit or even dethrone an unfit emperor, with or without parliamentary support. The Emperor's primary support in governments comes from the ambassadors, the official imperial liaisons to different government offices. The same word is used for ambassadors between nations, leading to an unfortunate ambiguity which translation software struggles to clarify. While most imperial affairs do not concern the Emperor directly, the centralization of power leads to Vasudan government being generally more cohesive than our own. Notably, while the PvE holds much less territory than the GTA, each of its systems is much more densely populated, with a much greater exploitation of natural resources. It is estimated that Alpha Centauri alone has an economic output equivalent to Delta Serpentis and Beta Oculae together. On its surface, Vasudan society appears to be much less diverse than ours. The reality is more complex. We're going to hear that a lot, I think. Vasudan culture is somewhat at odds with itself, with competitions between individuals, organizations, and ideologies being just as, if not more, prevalent than in Terran space. In human history, these competitions often gave way to violence. In Vasudan history, however, they are far more focused on artistic and philosophical spheres in ways that seem impossibly subtle to Terran observers. During Earth's ancient history, a conflict between nobles or nations might involve anything from economic sanctions to the deployment of armed forces. An equivalent conflict in Vasudan's history might instead center on the sale of art objects. This is not to say that Vasudan history is free of internecine fighting, as the Hammer of Light movement demonstrates, and these conflicts have an unfortunate tendency to involve government and legal matters. During the 14 Years' War, it was believed that the conflict began in part due to a Terran mishandling of Vasudan language. Discussions during peacetime revealed that the then Emperor was influenced by the machinations of a traditionalist group whose members went on to hold leadership positions in the Hammer of Light. Oh. In all interactions with our Vasudan colleagues, it is crucial to remember that they developed in a radically different environment than our own, and it would be chauvinistic to expect their psychology to resemble ours. The Vasudan perspective may be difficult to understand, but it must be accepted. Alright, next is the Regulus Syndicate. We only have 3 entries left in the factions. The Regulus system was colonized by a conglomerate of corporate interests which had been given an unprecedentedly generous charter by the Alliance Liaison Office in nearby Polaris. Notable companies including the Han Ronald Corporation, Diamond Eye Pharmaceuticals, and Terran Reactor Systems almost immediately moved their corporate headquarters to the new business-friendly Regulus colonies. The Regulus charter was challenged as an illegal quid pro quo arrangement, but delays in prosecution combined with a subtle loophole allowed the charter to remain in effect. The governments of Regulus, elected from among the directors of the most powerful corporations, passed an extensive series of legislation intended to attract workers to the system. War refugees, released felons, and other vulnerable people flocked to Regulus, enticed by the possibility of a fresh start. What they found was nothing short of abject exploitation. In time, the people of Regulus banded together. A solidarity movement, calling itself the Regulus Workers Syndicate after its decentralized nature, began to push back against corporate abuse. When Regulus's corporate leaders failed to provide services like security and adequate medical care, the Syndicate stepped in. When the corporations moved to suppress Syndicate activity, the Syndicate moved to protect itself. While the corporations had the advantages of better funding and the law on their side, the workers of the Syndicate had nothing to lose. When security providers began to openly support the Syndicate, Regulus's government employed underhanded tactics to suppress it. Agreeing to some of the workers' demands in exchange for carefully chosen concessions gradually eroded the Syndicate's unity and will until, eventually, corporate negotiators were able to install more moderate leaders. Eventually, the Syndicate became a shadow of its former self, just another of the quasi-legal guilds operating in Regulus, although a powerful one, with much of the shipping, security, and healthcare markets under their control. Even legitimate businesses often feel the need to register with them for protection. The GTA Human Rights Commission views the decay of the Regulus Syndicate, the word workers has long since been dropped from the name, into its current form as one of the Alliance's worst failures. Unionization, the Commission argues, has historically been a crucial tool for disadvantaged groups to stand up to power. They go on to say that the GTA need only have provided the barest support to the Workers' Syndicate, but failed to do so for fear of upsetting corporate interests. The Alliance has not refuted this statement. Operations are ongoing to weaken the Syndicate's hold over Regulus, Sirius, and Polaris. Some seek to remove particularly troublesome criminal kingpins from power, or play off different Syndicate groups against each other. Others operate more indirectly, providing employment or social services untainted by Syndicate influence. The unfortunate reality, however, is that stabilizing the situation in Regulus may require more assets than the GTA can currently provide. Notice that Regulus, along with Polaris and Sirius, because it was Polaris that granted the Regulus Charter, go on to become the Neo-Terran Alliance systems, the Neo-Terran Front systems, I should say. The Second Dawn Society. The Second Dawn Society is a paramilitary organization operating in Luyten. The SDS believes that a second Shivan incursion is inevitable and that a sufficiently prepared, sufficiently independent organization could provide a bastion for human survival should conventional military resistance fail, eventually bringing about a second dawn for the species. To this end, the SDS are developing a network of low-visibility Oort cloud stations, each tasked with specific survival purposes, with enough redundancies to recover from the loss of a single station. While the SDS estimate they are roughly 20 years away from realizing their objectives, they have already established their core infrastructure, an efficient command structure, and a well-trained fighter corps. Recruitment focused on disaffected members of society, promising a new, if unconventional, life with a bigger purpose to it. The Second Dawn Society is strictly a Terran organization owing to the difficulties in maintaining food production and medical care for two separate species in a survival situation. The Second Dawn Society owes its existence to Amira Ekel, a longtime holonovel star and heir to a fortune measured in the billions. During the chaos of the Shivan attack on Riviera Station, Ekel's transport collided with another vessel, leaving it unable to initiate subspace. While Ekel survived the attack, it left them with severe neurological damage, motor impairment, and near blindness, exacerbated by their prolonged time in a survival suit without medical attention. As the Shivan incursion wore on, Ekel lent financial support where they could, but ultimately felt compelled to become more actively involved. When the Luyten New Alliance was granted autonomy, Ekel proposed a partnership. Their nascent organization would take up responsibility for policing the system, freeing the LNA to focus on their research. In exchange, the LNA would offer advanced technologies for the SDS stations. The Society's main strategy during a second Shivan incursion would be one of stealth. Once fully operational, their stations could remain undetected in the Oort cloud for decades. Their fighter corps' main asset, the TF Pele, is designed to make long patrols to monitor Shivan activity. SDS strike craft have good subspace maneuverability in spite of their large size, making them effective fast response units. Should a patrol detect Shivan activity, the Society would have the option to respond with overwhelming force, destroying the target through mass railgun fire and jumping away before enemy reinforcements can arrive. After the Battle of Megiddo Station, the Second Dawn Society abandoned their semi-isolationist perspective to join the fight against the Raiders and the Hammer of Light, which, per their agreement described earlier, they should have been doing anyway. So, let's, our last entry is STX Exploration. The STX Corporation dates back to 1976, where it operated heavy industry shipyards aimed at the exploitation of aquatic resources. Towards the end of the 21st century, the company partnered with the International Aeronautical and Space Administration to provide ocean-going launch platforms. When the economic uncertainty of the 2090s temporarily suspended IASA operations, STX leveraged its network of contacts to create its own spacecraft to take advantage of these platforms at a time when other manufacturers were cutting back on operations. Rebranded as STX Exploration, the company became the first Earth-based entity to mine the asteroid belt, competing directly with the Martian Han Rald Corporation. STX Exploration is believed to have been a contributing factor in the severity of the 22nd century's unification war. The demonstrated viability of belt mining by a non-governmental entity led to a boom in private spacecraft construction, as numerous companies on Earth and Mars shook off their economic stagnation to compete in the new market. When the discovery of the intersystem jump node to Delta Serpentis caused tensions between Earth, Mars, and the newly colonized Jupiter to boil over, more ships in Sol were operated by private parties than by any government, allowing corporate interests throughout the Belt and Jovian moon systems to become minor belligerents in their own right and directly leading to the nascent GTA struggle to centralize authority. During the 14 Years' War, the GTA contracted with STX Exploration to mine militarily valuable ores and develop a heavily armed freighter to safely move them. This influx of cash cemented STX's position as a heavyweight in galactic industry, and it maintains a near monopoly over mining operations in the distant Laramis and Luyten systems. And that is it for factions. We've already gone long, so reading by manufacturer will be a different video, along with reading the intelligence tab. But for now, this has been the Tech Room faction descriptions for Between the Ashes, The Growing Silence for Freespace 2 here on Paladin Gaming. This is Paladin Gaming, signing off.